Hello, so today I'm shooting this video on location. I'm at The Nest, the studio, the home of Aron Bicskey. We're going to be looking at drums and how we mic up drums, particularly at church situations and all that involves. We're going to go through miking techniques, we're going to go at mic placement and where we position microphones, drum cages, do we use drum cages or not, and how does that affect sound? All things drum related. Let's jump into today's video. Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Ben.
So we're here.
Yeah.
So this is Aron. We're here in The Nest. As I say, we're going to be looking today at drums and all things drum related. So who are you? What do you do? What's your day job?
So I'm Aron, as we established that. I'm a drummer, music producer.
Yep.
Making music, making tracks for the people and play on people's records and play live. This is my little place, the Nest, as I call it, where I have my drums set up and that's where I record.
Played with Philippa Hanna.
For a few years,
Spragan.
Yeah, I currently play with Lucy, which is a great gig. It's a bunch of very fun people and very talented people, so what's not to like?
Yeah.
We shared a stage with Gary Barlow and
Nice.
Heather Small,
Yeah.
JP Cooper,
Cool.
those guys, Elliot Kennedy, a Sheffield producer, songwriter. It was great to gauge the level of screams when Gary Barlow walked on stage. I should have had a dB meter with me to see how
that worked.
How wild that is.
Yeah. And of course, you're currently doing a lot of work with the Homegrown Worship group as well, the guys there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have the Homegrown Worship. I do a lot of the music production on those.
Yeah.
And recording.
And playing some of the drums for some of the tracks on those.
Yeah, most of them. If there's live drums on there, then
that's you.
That would be me.
Yeah. Great. So I think it's fair to say you know your way around a drum kit. You've had a fair bit of time behind a drum kit.
Had a few years.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's for sure. Too many probably.
I think we need to start off by tackling the big question that all drummers face in church life. Cage or no cage?
Cage or no cage? Oh.
It's a challenging one.
Well, I think as a drummer I would prefer cage.
Yep.
Because then I can go a bit more wild.
Yep. If
there's no cage, then I would have to behave.
Yep.
Watch what I'm doing.
Yep.
With a cage, it's a bit more freedom.
Yeah.
I can dig in a bit more. I can perform better. I play better. A lot of drummers struggle with playing quiet. It's harder. It's harder to play quiet.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd agree. I think it's you've got a bit more freedom, haven't you, with that?
So as a drummer, I prefer cage. If it's a room that requires a cage. As a sound engineer, again, if the drummer is causing problems, maybe too heavy on the cymbals or doesn't really have the finesse to blend in with the band, then I would ask for a cage.
Yeah, it can help. Yeah. Okay, so that's personal preference about drum cages and whether we use them or not. Let's just talk for a minute about miking up in those two situations. I mean, I think there's an argument to say it's actually possible to mic both with and without a drum cage. There's obviously different things that we're trying to do with those two things. So let's start off using mics without a drum cage. Kind of seems almost counterproductive. If we're not caging the drums up, why are we going to mic them up? Right. What would that look like and why would we do that?
I see people horrified when I would walk into a venue and it's a smaller space and then I start hanging mics on the drums.
Yeah.
People are like, what are you doing? What's wrong with you? The thing is, it's not for volume. Like,
No.
you don't need any more drums
Yeah.
in that room, or if it's a church, the last thing you need is more drums. You've got plenty
Yeah.
that comes off the stage. But it's more for clarity. Sometimes I demonstrate. It's like, just, listen to the difference when you put those mics and push the faders up and they start coming out of the speakers. And the level at which they come out, it's not more than the actual sound that the...
No, that's it.
A little bit more, because it would have to overpower the acoustic noise.
But possibly more so in certain frequencies than others.
Yeah.
So it's not just about bringing the whole lot up louder.
It just helps with the low end, with the bottom end. So it's round there. The snare would have a bit more body to it, rather than just listening from a distance. You mainly just hear the crack of the snare and the bottom.
Yeah.
And it's just not an awful pleasant sound. So having that and then putting through speakers, it just gives a lot more roundness and clarity and definition to the drums, but it doesn't have to be louder.
No.
Yeah.
I tend to think of it as blending that sound, because you think, an acoustic guitar played acoustically sounds different to how it does when it's amplified through a PA system. And those sounds change as you put them through the PA system. Same with the voice. Singers singing through the PA system, there's a change that the character of the speakers, the character of the PA system kind of takes on. And as you're amplifying all those sounds, it helps that you can then do the same thing with the drums and blend all that. So everything's then coming through the same speakers, the same sound coming through. And you get that more of a blend of sound with the rest of the band as well.
Yeah, it sounds like a mix.
Yeah.
Rather than different things coming out from
That's it. Yeah. So number of mics, you think 3 or 4 mics covers it for non? I mean, certainly we don't want to go to the extent that you would if you had drums in a drum booth.
No, I mean, you can. A lot of the worship songs nowadays are pretty tom heavy.
Yeah.
They've got a lot of
tom stuff
tom
going
action.
on. Yeah.
So you might want to have a mic on the tom just to give you a bit more
body to it.
Yeah. Or a bit of attack.
Yeah.
But again, it depends on the room. But I would say kick drum.
I
would almost certainly put something on the kick drum.
Yeah.
And if you have a sub, it's even better. You can put the kick drum
into the sub a bit. Yeah.
The good thing with the sub is it's not going to get in the way of anything.
No.
Apart from bass, maybe.
Yeah.
But vocals,
they don't go down that low. Nothing else is going down that low, are they?
So you're not really fighting for space.
No.
With anything else, so it's a no-brainer really, because it really supports the mix, supports the song. It's still worth it. Snare drum, again, if the room is big enough, sure.
And you might find you get a lot of sub from overheads, because again, overheads could be quite useful just to help bring some of that out. I mean, if you don't want to go to the extent of miking up every tom and your snare, possibly in some situations a pair of overheads might kind of give you enough of that just to blend that in and to help give that clarity.
Yeah, another good use of mics or overheads, regardless of the room and regardless if you need it in the mix or not. Let's say the musicians are playing to track, or they are in ears. As a drummer, I would struggle if I did not have a mix coming through my ears. So even if you don't really need the overheads in your front of house mix, or your spot mics, for the player it would be quite important. So that even if it's just a pair of overheads, then I can hear what I'm playing. Because otherwise, if I have my in-ears in and the click is going and everybody else is in there but not drums,
you can disappear.
I would I would disappear and I would play pretty loud. It's like the same thing when you put the headphones on and you start shouting. It's like you don't need to shout, but you lose the sense of how loud things are.
That's it. So absolutely.
What did you say?
Yeah.
No need. Just calm down. Same with drums. Not long ago I just did this gig and I had to be quite conscious not to overplay.
Yeah.
So I cranked my overheads up to the point that it was painful if I got too excited.
Yeah, it's a good tip. I do that. I do the same thing. I often, so Aaron and I actually go to the same church, and I often tell the engineers at our church I'm going to play to what I can hear, and if I can hear too much of the drums, that's going to make me play down. Whereas if I can't hear myself, I'm going to want to play up to be able to hear myself.
Yeah.
And that might lead us into actually playing in a cage, because almost those problems that we have, that we've just been talking about not being able to hear and being isolated in that sense, are worsened when you're playing in a drum booth, aren't they? Perhaps first of all, just to say, I think there's very, very few church situations where I'd say it's ever worth having a drum screen without a lid on. If you're going to cage your drums, it needs to be a full drum cage, lid, top, back, side, everything all covered all round. Unless you happen to have a church that meets in a massive arena or something.
Right.
Most people, most of the time, if you're going to cage them completely.
It's definitely worth it. If you don't have the means or the space or you move in and out of the room every Sunday, and it's difficult to build a proper cage. A screen is better than nothing.
Yeah.
But it's not gonna.
You're still going to get spill out over the top,
aren't you?
Spill
out, yeah. But at least the direct sound is not hitting the front row.
Yeah.
And let's be honest. Most of the time, it's the front row.
The front row.
Please.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But so at least you got that they're not getting the drums full on.
Yeah.
But then microphones are pretty important there, because
absolutely you lose everything really, don't you? What you're left with after that point isn't really a usable drum sound, is it?
And that probably would take us to another point, because we haven't really talked about the overheads that much.
Yep.
Because if it's not caged, if it's just the drums are out in the open.
Yep.
We've talked about the kick drum, the snare drum, maybe toms, spot mics.
Yep.
Overheads.
Yep.
You can get away without them. For ears, it's very helpful.
Yep.
But when you're in a cage, what you'll find is if you just use your spot mics, it just sounds like a cardboard box.
Yeah.
Your kick and snare is a bit lifeless.
Yeah.
So what I find, without the cage, at least you have some sort of acoustic sensation of the drums coming at you.
Yeah.
You feel like, oh, it's a drum kit. But when you close mic, nobody listens to the drums like, let me hear that tom. Oh, lovely tone. Nobody sticks a hand into the kick drum. No. It's just not a natural way to listen to the instrument.
No.
It's good for other reasons, but to have the overheads.
Yeah.
To give, it's not just for the people think our overheads are for cymbals.
Yeah.
And more so in recording, when you record overheads, they give you a full picture of the drum kit.
Yeah.
As you would, like if you stand over the drums, that's what your ears would hear.
Yeah.
It sounds more like a drum to us.
Yeah.
Than sticking your head into the kick drum. So having that in a cage, having a pair of overheads that picks up that organic, more natural sounding snapshot of the drums.
Yeah.
That's a big deal, because then all of a sudden you add those overheads. Obviously, don't put them right on the cymbal, because then it's not going to help.
Yeah.
But if you hang them in the right way, then you feel like, oh, actually, this is a drum kit.
Starts
to
sound like a drum kit again. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. No, that's helpful. Yeah, that's good. So really, when we get into drumming in a cage, in a drum booth, we really are looking at upping the number of mics. We really do need to kind of spot mic everything with your overheads as well. Would you say?
Yes, you would. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, now you wouldn't hear it.
Yeah.
You would hear a muffled rumble.
Yeah, but it
coming
wouldn't
at
sound
you
like
as
a
a
drum
tom,
kit.
but it wouldn't sound like a drum. So you would really need to put something there, so now you can make it audible.
Yeah.
And enjoyable.
Yeah.
So now we're talking about amplification rather than just shaping the tone, which is different.
Another one of them, we won't go into this much today, but another issue is monitoring. You need to really be on your monitoring, don't you? Because you isolate the drums, but you also, for the drummer, you isolate the rest of the band as well, and
you isolate the drums from the rest of the band.
Yeah.
So try to keep the band together, and then you ended up like hitting the hats, the hi-hat with 2 hands, and then kicking your drum. That's not my tempo. if you get the reference.
Yeah. Right.
Indeed.
I reckon that's enough talking. Let's start looking at some of this stuff in action, shall we? We'll start going through some exercises, and we're going to put different mics on some of the drums here. We're going to look at some mics on snare drums. We'll just focus on the snare drum and how a bunch of different mics are all going to sound different on that one same drum. So we'll change nothing else. So for all of this next part, the only thing we're going to change is the gain. We're going to not do any EQing, no compression, no manipulation of the sound in any way, shape or form. We'll just keep the mics completely flat. We'll just change the gain as needed. But we'll go through and look at how dynamic mics, condenser mics, just various different options of microphones are going to sound different on the same snare drum, same player, same everything else. We'll just change the microphone out and how that affects the sound.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So that was a look at the snare drum, top mics on the snare drum. A lot of different sounds there, a lot of variation in those microphones. I mean, in many ways, I think people often think that, you look at two microphones and they're sort of two black lollipop-looking things, and you think, how different can they be? Actually, very different.
Very different. And there are good things and not so good things about each of them. Some of them are just very dark and warm.
Yeah, more kind of mellow tone.
Which is good if you don't want a lot of cymbals.
Yes.
If somebody's heavy-handed on the heads or smashing the crash, it's like right there.
Yeah.
You would struggle with a bright-sounding microphone because it would just all over the place.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the downsides of doing what we've just done, is that you only hear the snare drum in isolation, don't you? We don't hear how that sounds with the rest of the kit, and there could be other factors that might implicate on the sound that you end up with.
Yeah, I love some of those condenser mics.
Yeah.
When you have the brightness and still retain the body of the instrument, it's like, ooh, that's very sort of exciting sounding.
Yeah.
But I'd imagine once you put the cymbals to it,
you're going to get a lot of bleed.
You
And
got a lot of bleed.
Yeah.
They might not be so directional.
Yeah.
So all these to consider, but it's definitely a good exercise to see the different sounds and different...
And how that changes, yeah. Was there a mic that did something very different to what you sort of expected it would? Was there something that you thought, well, I wasn't quite expecting that to be like that?
Yeah, the first condenser mic we put on the
Samsung CO2.
CO2.
Yeah.
It's a fairly cheap...
Yeah, really cheap little microphone.
So I was expecting a not so enjoyable noise to come out of them. Yeah. But when we listened back, I was like, oh, actually... Yeah. It's not a bad noise.
Pretty reasonable sound for something that, I mean, I don't know what the price on those are, but they're like 50 quid or something. They're not expensive at all. And yeah, they're for the money, they're really good little mics, really. They do a very good job. Yeah.
And then I love the SE ones.
Yes, yeah.
They were lovely.
That was nice, yeah. One of the ones that really stood out to me was the difference between the SM57 and the Beta 57. Those were dramatically different, which I wasn't quite expecting them to be as different as they were. And actually, I didn't like the SM57 as much as I liked the Beta 57 on the top. I think the SM57 works well underneath, but considering how many people use an SM57 on the top snare, actually for me the Beta 57 completely wiped it. I thought that was a much nicer sounding mic on the top snare.
Yeah, probably a bit less mid.
Yeah.
A bit less bite. But again, for some things you want the bite.
Yeah.
The one that, crack to come through.
Yeah.
Each of these mics, they have a place and they're good for certain things, but it's just personal taste, isn't it?
Yep.
But it just shows
just how different.
What the difference.
Yeah, that's
makes.
right. Yeah, it's always worth having a try with some different mics. And if you're ever in a situation where you've got some other mics lying around and you just want to try something, it's always worth experimenting. If you if your band have a practice time or something, just try some stuff out and see what works and see what's good, because you might find some surprises.
Yeah.
Okay, so next up then, let's try, we're going to take the 57 and we're going to stick it underneath and see how that sounds. You can just see how the difference is between the sound of the top of the snare and the sound of the bottom of the snare, because again, there's a bit of a difference there, isn't there? But let's have a play with that and see where that gets us. Okay, so that's the top head versus bottom head microphone, SM57 on the top, SM57 on the bottom. A different sound, top to bottom. Personally, I didn't find many surprises there. It was, it was what it was. There is a difference between the top and the bottom head. Depending on your context, you may want to make both of those up. You maybe don't. You maybe just be able to get away with a mic on the top. But there is that option there, isn't there, of being able to do both. Probably not a lot more to be said on that. It is what
it's not a very joyful noise.
No.
The bottom snare.
No.
You don't want to...
Certainly in isolation.
You're not going to dream about them.
No. No, that's right. It can be helpful at times to blend that, but you're always going to want to mic the top as well. You're going to use both. You're not just going to use the bottom of your ears.
Often,
no.
Unless you use it for some sort of capital punishment. You might isolate it and put it through the speaker on its own.
Yeah, if anybody ever wants to know how to torture Aaron, that's
just chain me and play some bottom snare all night long.
Yeah, but there we go. That's the bottom snare. Okay, so let's move on to something that maybe has got a bit more interest and a bit more help here. So we can look at the position, angle, spacing of microphones. So we're going to look at, do we mic straight onto the kind of the rim, the edge of the drum, or do we angle the mic more into the centre? Do we go right up close to the head? Do we back it off a little bit? Do we back it off a long way? How would you position a drum mic on the?
I like to put it sort of just Yeah, I can see it. Yeah,
I think we can see that one coming out.
Yeah, on the snare, I like to put it just maybe slightly further in than the rim, and then about this height pointing to the centre. So I want the microphone to point where I'm hitting.
Yeah.
Because that's where the body of the instrument will be. The edges kind of be quite hunky and pingy.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Yeah.
Not very pleasant. So I'm aiming for the centre.
Yeah.
And have some distance between the head and the microphone.
Yeah.
Because the more you will hear you will hear it when
as we go through.
Listen.
Yeah.
But the more you put it near the head, you can pick up a lot of the overtones and
the ringing and yeah.
So if you want, and that's a good thing to do if you have a quite a ringy snare drum, just back off the microphone a little bit from the head.
Okay.
Lift it a bit higher.
Yeah.
So it loses a little bit of that harsh ring.
Good tip.
It's not going to get rid of it, but it will make it a bit more sort of even. With the actual snare hit.
Yeah. Well, shall we have a listen? We can run through. We'll do some various positions on a snare drum, and then also various positions on the toms as well, and run around the toms.
Yeah, we just call them the silly position number 1 and number 2 because you wouldn't use those.
No,
really. It's just for
just
demonstration
so you can
purposes.
See how it differs. Yeah.
It's not often that you see a microphone
straight
pointing there.
No, that's right. Yeah.
Nobody does that, but it's a good thing to listen to what it sounds like.
Yeah, and you can see why you never do that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So let's have a listen.
Let's.
Okay, so that was the mic positions and where we position the microphones. Again, there's perhaps not too much to say on that. I mean, as we say, there's silly positions, but you're never going to use those. But you can hear, hopefully, in that why you'd never use those.
Yeah.
And maybe that's helpful in the sense that if you ever listen to your mix and you're thinking, oh, that snare drum sounds very ringy, maybe it's because you now know that your microphone's pointing too much towards the rim and you need to push that out or lift it up a little bit or move it away. But hopefully some of those sounds will now be familiar to you and you can adjust mics.
Before you reach for the EQ, it's sometimes useful to move the mics around or speak to the drummer. I mean, no harm in that.
Yeah.
And most of the time.
Generally a fairly friendly bunch.
Yeah, you got the odd ones out, but hey, you have to risk it sometimes. If it's too much ring, just put something on it.
Yeah.
Well, not the drummer.
A cat or a...
Bring your cat.
Yeah, so there we go. There's drum mic positions. I guess the only other thing to perhaps point out with mic positioning is just thinking about where you point that microphone. So if we're going to angle the microphone into a drum, I tend to, I don't know whether you do the same, particularly with tom mics, try not to angle them so they're pointing across and then onto the snare drum, so that you don't get too much snare drum bleed, but try to angle them away from other instruments as much as you can, so that you're not getting too much bleed in when you're angling your mics.
Probably the most important one is the snare.
Yeah.
Because the hi-hat is just so close. So you'd have to move the mic so it's kind of facing away from the hi-hat as much as possible. Yeah. Some people even put a little sponge or something over the...
Yeah. I have seen you can even get like mini shields, like you would for a vocal singer. Get a little mini shield that can go round and try and protect from that as well. But just have to. You can do it with positioning, can't you? If you just angle the microphone away to try and avoid any spill from those things.
Yeah, and that's why it's actually quite helpful if a drummer is aware of the other side, the dark side as I call it. Yeah. Which is the sound desk. Yeah. Because then you play differently, or at least you try to be conscious about smashing the hi-hat. Yeah. Smashing the cymbals with all your might, because you know that it's going to cause a lot of problems. Yeah. So if you can, then as a player you ease back and try to help the sound guy, but you don't always get that.
Or even have the conversation with them. You know, I've been in situations, I find it very helpful when I'm mixing sound and the drummer will say to me, can you just come and check this mic position? I'm not sure this mic's in the right place. And if you're struggling to get a good sound out of the snare drum and you can't think out why, and all the time the drummer's sat there and the microphone's the other side of the drum booth, and you're thinking... You know, it doesn't take a genius to say that if we're micing up a snare drum, the mic needs to be near the snare drum. And so that communication and that just, you know, if you spot something as a drummer that's not quite right, ask the sound guy. If the sound guy's not quite sure and something's not quite right, ask the drummer. And communication, hopefully you can sort it out between the two of you. Yeah. Okay, so let's move on. Bass drums. Bass drum, kick drum? Yeah. Do you I once got told off by somebody for calling it a kick drum. Do you have any objections?
No, I use it a kick drum.
Kick drum, bass drum.
Maybe jazz dudes they like to call it bass drum just because that's what they call it. Yeah, but I'm perfectly happy with kick drum. Yeah. Yeah, we will do a few different positions. Yeah, so we'll look at mic positions. So just out on the front of the head, over the sound hole. Because sometimes you find that you go to, somebody turns up and there's no hole. Yeah. The last thing you want to do is just to get a Stanley knife and
cut one.
Walk up to the drummer.
Yeah. So we can look at what that sounds like if you put it on the head. Look at what it sounds like if you put it over the hole. But then we can also push into the hole as well and get a different sound. How is that going to change the sound if we push into the hole?
Well, generally speaking, the more you move towards the beater, the more snap you're going to get. Yeah. And maybe a bit less body. Yeah. And that works well if you have multiple mics. If you want to put an outside mic and then an inside mic. Yeah. If you want the inside mic to be very clicky and punchy, then you can put it close to the beater. Yeah. And so have another mic that picks up more of the low end.
Yeah, and you can experiment with different types of mic. We haven't done. We're not going to do that, but you can try like a standard pencil condenser type microphone inside to give you that real kind of snappy click. Or sometimes people will use a flat kind of boundary type mic, won't they? So you can use other types of mics to get that different sound in there. But we'll just stick with just the standard bass drum mics today, and you can just see how those sounds all change. So
okay, I'm going to use a few different ones.
Yeah, we'll go for a few different models. Yeah, and see same positions for all of them. And again, no EQ, no compression, nothing else. Just keep them flat, but just change out the mics and use those positions as we try the different mics.
So one of them will be this SE V kick I have, and it's great because it has a switch at the back, and you can shape the sound of it, and it's actually really useful. Whatever they did to it.
Yep.
You have classic low end and modern low end, and then classic high end and modern high end sort of thing. So it's kind of like an EQ curve, but it's I'm gonna use the modern.
Yeah.
It's quite punchy and.
Yeah. It doesn't actually have a flat option, does it? So we've got to pick one or the other.
Yeah, but you have like 4 different variations.
Yeah.
So this is actually, I found, a super little mic because you have almost 4 different mics in here.
Yeah.
And they really work, and it's just like a...
Yeah. It's certainly... in the modern position, it's a very modern sound, as we'll hear in a minute. Yeah. It's got a very modern sound to it, and I think for a lot of churches, a lot of modern kind of worship stuff, that's going to be a great sound, and it's going to work well for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think it sounds a bit like the D6.
Yeah, the Audix one.
Audix ones,
yeah.
In a modern position, that has the sort of punchy modern sound.
Yeah,
but yeah.
Have a listen.
Shout out to these guys.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay, great. So there we go. Microphones, kick microphones. So there was a lot of difference, obviously, between the in front of the head, in front of the hole, just inside the hole, and then all the way in, almost up to the other head. But really nothing, there's kind of no right or wrong position. It just depends as to what sound you're going for, isn't there?
Yeah.
It's,
what you're after.
Yeah. So either you're going to find one of those positions that works well, or perhaps, as you say, a combination. Use a couple of mics, one inside the drum and one just outside the drum, and again, just experiment with those positions and try them out. Okay, so the last thing I think we'll look at is the overheads. So we spoke a bit at the beginning about how important they can be, in particular if you're in a booth. You really want to try and capture those overhead sounds. And there's a number of microphone options that you can use for this. I mean, most of the time I've never seen, certainly in a live situation, I've never seen anything other than a condenser microphone used for overheads. Have you ever come across anything? Ribbon is sometimes used for recording.
Yeah, ribbon sounds great in overheads.
Yeah, but otherwise it's condenser, certainly for live stuff, it's generally condenser mics that you're going to be using, isn't it? So what would be great is if we look at a small diaphragm condenser and a large diaphragm condenser, and we'll just try those two different mics out, because they're going to give slightly different options. And there's both of those, you see both of those used, so just look at what are the advantages of one over the other, and why might you choose one and not the other one. So
we're going to use the LA120. It's a Luton American brand, and that's the small condenser, and then that's the big daddy, but it's the same make, so it should give you a bit
reasonable,
a fair, they're probably not going to be like super different in characteristics.
No.
And we're using it flat, so we know there's loads of different options here to cut low pass, high pass.
Yeah.
Same on the large diaphragm. We're just going to keep them flat.
Keep it all flat. Yeah. And just hear the differences between the small and the large diaphragm. Yeah.
Let's do it.
Let's do that one. Okay, so two different overheads, two different sounds, as you say, same brand, same manufacturer, but the microphones did sound quite different.
Quite different, yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of what we expected.
Yeah.
It was going to do. The small condenser had a bit more mid.
Yeah.
And it was faster transients.
Yeah.
Because it's a smaller membrane that needs to move.
Yeah.
So it can respond quicker.
Yeah.
So you can hear the attack, the transients a bit more popping out.
Yeah. Makes it a bit kind of snappier, doesn't it?
It's snappier,
yeah.
Yeah. But I loved the large ones. Just sounded nice and round.
Yeah.
So to capture the tone of the full drum kit.
Yeah.
I think they sounded wonderful.
Yeah.
And but again, you have a larger diaphragm that needs to move, and it would probably respond a bit slower.
Yeah.
Just because.
Yeah. So it gives it kind of a bit more of a washy sound. It's not so punchy. It's not so tight. Bit more of a bodied sound.
A bit more like all around.
Yeah.
So both of them are sounding good depending on what you want to
That's
use
it
for.
Yeah, there's no right or wrong. They're both good. Both sound great. Pros and cons to both of them, but they're just different, and they're going to give you better responses in different situations. I actually thought that the larger diaphragm would probably work better if you weren't in a drum cage and you wanted something that just gave you a bit of a general sound of the drums. Probably those large diaphragms are going to do that better for you.
Yeah, true. Yeah, it give you a wider spectrum.
Yeah.
I mean, people do use them. The AKG 414s, 414,
212s and the 414s, I think, aren't they? The two, yeah.
They like to use them on overheads. They sound wonderful.
Yeah, they do.
Great sounding mics.
Yeah.
But they are fairly large.
Yeah. And the other one that I quite like that's good because the as you say, the AKGs are brilliant, but they're like £1,000 each or something, aren't they? They're pretty expensive mics.
Yeah.
But the SE 2200s and the 2200As are two kind of fairly reasonable, good quality sort of budget end, more sort of, I think they're kind of £100-150 a mic kind of end, and at that price they're again fairly reasonable, large diaphragm condenser that you could look at as an alternative.
Yeah, I mean I mainly use the small condenser and overheads.
Yep.
Here. But now I think I'm going to leave these guys up there. I really like them.
Yeah, they sound great. Yeah, a lot of body to them.
They are staying. And another thing to consider with the overheads is I like to keep the snare in the centre.
Yeah.
And if you think about the overheads as your ears, the further, if you have two ears and one of your ears is here, the other one is there. Yeah. Sound gonna enter this one
quicker
before it enters that one, so that will skew your picture of where the snare drum is. Yeah. So we'd like to measure from the snare center. Yeah. Both of the overheads are the same distance from the snare.
Yeah, just physically take a measurement. Either you can use a tape measure or. If you've just got a wire, cables are really useful for that. Yeah. You can just take a cable, measure it, place one end of it on the snare drum, measure up to the microphone and match it on both sides and just make sure you've got that in the middle.
Otherwise your snare end up on the left side and the right side of the stereo field.
Yeah. Or the other thing that can happen is you can get phasing issues.
And you get phasing,
because they're not coming in at the same time. So can be quite important to do that. The phasing can make a big difference to the sound of the drums, can't it?
Big difference, and you probably, again, going back to the booth situation, you probably, as a sound engineer, need to know what you're doing a bit more than when it's not in a booth, because the kit and the overheads is likely to be out of phase depending on how high they are. Yeah. So you might need to flip the phase to make it sound, because it can really ruin your sound. Yeah. If the overhead's out of phase and you really want to push them. Yeah. To give that sort of natural sounding drum sound. Yeah. If they're out of phase, then they're gonna really bite you in the back.
Yeah. That's right.
So just try and flip the phase, see what it does. Yeah. If it helps or not. It's mainly the low end, isn't it? Like, you lose a lot of low end if it's out of phase.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's where you'll really notice it first of all. And sometimes it just you almost sometimes can't quite pin down what the problem is. It's one of those things that I think if it doesn't quite sound right, then it could be a phasing problem. Mm-hmm. And it's sometimes I just think it's one of those things that's just almost a bit difficult to identify. And if you just listen to the sound and you're thinking, there's something there that's not quite right, but I can't quite work out what it is. Yeah. Try flipping the phase and see if that solves it or not. Yeah.
Flip the flipping phase.
Great. Well, thank you. It's been a good day.
It was good.
We've covered a lot of stuff.
I mean, what's not to like? Microphones, drums.
That's it. Yeah. Great. Yeah.
We could do that all day, which we did.
We have. Yeah. Yeah. So thanks for watching. Hope you found this helpful. As always, hit all the buttons, the like, subscribe, bell icon, all those, wherever they are, wherever they end up, hit those things. And we'll see you in the next video.
Boom. That's a wrap.
Done.